Morning, everybody. My name is Shay. It is Thursday, time for a live stream. Things will be kicking off here as we start. I am not 100% sure what I want to work on today. Kind of hoping for a couple people to jump on the stream and let me know what they have an interest in doing. In the meantime, I was just pasting this dungeon room map that I had finished into my book so that I have it safely stored away for posterity. I'm thinking that I need some new notebook for keeping my world building in. This is just a sketchbook, so it's kind of whatever I've got going on. But a world building notebook I think would be good. Good morning, my Patrick. How are you? What should we work on today? World building or mapping or what? I have Dexter's solar system map that I'm working on, or I could start the Patreon map for July, or I could start a dungeon map for a trial of strength that I have my players going through when we meet up again on Sunday. That would be more, I guess, like encounter design than strictly a dungeon map. Or I could play with like a new ISO dungeon. I haven't done one of those in a while. Good morning, my Laura. Yeah, I guess I can start a map and see where it goes. What do you feel like working on today, Miss Laura? Sure. What's your idea? That sounds like fun. That sounds like a lot of fun. Like a mermaid based on a sea anemone? That sounds really fun. I don't know. What sort of map, friends? That's a super good question. I'm thinking one with a more elaborate border, because we can. Something fun. That's not very specific, Laura. What kind of fun? What kind of fun are we talking about here? Patreon, I think, Laura. We should go see what the Cartographers Guild challenge is for this month. Maybe that would be inspiring. Cartoony cartography. Current mapping challenge is what I want. It's a Feywild map, you guys, which is freaking hysterical. Because I'm in the Feywild right now. So I guess let's do a map of the Summer Court. Because I can, I guess. And do some mushrooms. Yeah, it is kind of two birds, isn't it? morning, my Steph. How are you? Yay, work. My morning is okay. Slow and steady so far, which I don't mind. Nothing wrong with that. Had a hard time kind of figuring out where I wanted to start with this math, but there's a cartography challenge going on in the Cartography Guild for a map of the Feywild. So maybe we will play with that and see where we get. Yeah, I think so. Dennis, hey, how are you? Been doing okay. Got like coronavirus brain, which makes being inspired and creative difficult. But I imagine everybody on the planet is going through that to a greater or lesser extent right now, which doesn't make me special. But it does make life more interesting, that's for sure. Yeah, the wall is real, man. Like, for real, for real. This is a new map, yep. It's gonna be the July map for my patrons on Patreon, and I am inspired just moments ago by the cartography challenge on the Cartographers Guild, which is a map of the Feywild. So I'm just in the process of kind of designing a border of sorts. I think I want to go with like fungus, and just kind of see where that takes me, and then building the map of my area of the summer court that my players are in. Shelf fungus. I think I want shelf fungus. Building up her supply for Christmas markets, hey? Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult to be in this situation because there's not a lot of money for disposable income for people to spend on art. And that's a pretty difficult situation to be in when you rely on that kind of disposable income. I'm really fortunate that like Dave and I are not dependent on my income. Like what I make is good to have and everything, but it's not something that we're relying on to pay the bills. So it gives us a bit more breathing room than many I know of right now. Yeah, Dave is still active duty. Absolutely. For sure, for sure. I've been just really struggling with the whole inspiration thing the last little while. Like I don't have a lot of extra spoons for like running D&D or a whole bunch of other stuff, and it's just really frustrating. Yeah, we're base housing. It's a subsidized housing, like we still pay rent and stuff, but it is convenient to be in this situation, that's for sure. I think I mostly just feel really fortunate because our province is going through a lot of political upheaval right now in terms of like unemployment and wage cuts and a bunch of stuff. And I have never been more grateful that my husband is paid by the federal government, like ever. It is such a relief to not have to be stressed about that in the midst of all of the rest of this. This is just not doing what I want it to do. There we go. What kind of masks? Talk to me about that, because I've got a culture that incorporates masks pretty heavily myself, so I'm curious. What you thinking? I love this Wreck This journal. Do you guys want a quick flip through? Because it's looking pretty fabulous. I'm having a lot of fun with that project. It's been like exactly the right kind of size for stuff to do in a day, because like I can generally get one thing done at a time and get it through. So I'm clipping it shut right now to try and preserve the binding, but it's starting to get too thick for that to be practical. So pull this down so it's properly in the camera. So I'm having to really let go of the fact that like certain things bleed through onto other pages. Like this was the spilling the coffee one, and it bled through onto both sides, and it's just like, but at the same time, that's part of the process. So just let it be. I'm used to like a much prettier kind of journal, where there's a lot more finished work in it. So this has definitely been like challenging for me to let go of it needing to be pretty. Some pages are prettier than others. Like, I'm really happy with this one. But other ones are just like, well, it's done. This one's got strips that flip up, which is fun and interactive. I like that. And then I'm working on, this is a fill this page with circles one, so I'm doing compass roses. Those will probably get used later. This, I think, is my favorite spread out of the entire book because it documents my chicken nuggets that I made the other night. And those were delicious, even though they were so much work. Some of them I'm not looking forward to, like the chewing on the page is less fun. I have to make a paper airplane, which I've never been good at. These ones are all not done yet, so I'll just flip past them really quick. This is my paper chain that I made that I'm actually really proud of. It worked out well. And then this is the collection of fruit stickers that Stephanie is helping me build because I do not eat a lot of fruit right now. I like this spread too. I think this one turned out really well. I just take the book in the shower and I cannot even begin to tell you guys how nervous that makes me. Like, what if I wreck everything? This is the page with the stamps that I'm adding stamps to as I slowly get mail. And then this is another one that got really heavily worked. Definitely learning like the limits of my glue doing this. I really like this one too. I think this one turned out well. It smells really good too because I sprayed it with the cologne. So that was nice. And I think that might be the last. Oh no, this one I did yesterday. Oh yeah, and then this one. I started working on this one and I thought I would do like a found poem in it, but it's really been challenging. So yeah, that's where I'm at with it right now. Still so much more to do. But trying to just put my fingers on it once every day, do a little bit at a time, makes it feel manageable. Yeah, they're pretty fun. I recommend it, Laura. I really do. It's pretty vague right now, but essentially masks are created to prevent people from achieving crazy levels of notoriety and forming a cult of personality around people. But in the same respect, they evolved to display family lines, tribes, achievements, and became the opposite of what they were intended for. Interesting. I like that duality and that tension. That's really fun. And a big aspect of society is stealing identities by essentially mass copyright and similar things. Yeah, I could see how that would be a thing. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, small book press. Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Patrick. The clip is working well enough for now. And the binding won't keep getting too much bigger as long as I don't keep gluing tons of stuff into it. But glue is useful. And that is a thing. So Oh, I forgot to turn the air conditioner off in the bedroom. I hope that noise isn't annoying. Sorry, friends. It just turned back on. I can hear it again. What do I have for my mask culture? So in my mask culture, it is a dominant part of the political and religious landscape of my city of Invictus. Invictus is a colony of the Kayan Empire, and all of their gods are represented by masks. And the way that it kind of works is like, well, I guess not the gods, but the saints. The masks were, how did I explain this? Way, way, way back in the founding of the world, there was a war between the primordials and the elementals on the material plane because it's the only place they could overlap enough to actually fight each other. And part of this war involved duping the mortal races, the humans and the elves and whatnot, into being soldiers and couriers and various other bodies to fight this war with. And the way that that was possible was by the powers creating masks to kind of hide their identity. And so when the war was fought and then eventually the war was won, the masks stayed behind imbued with power and became potent artifacts that could be used for healing and for destruction and for various other things. And over time, they've been split up like relics, so that people can have like just shards of them or whatever. And that's how like a lot of divine magic gets moved around, is through these kinds of artifacts. But it's become almost a little bit Venetian in that the holidays are revolved around mask days, which celebrate the days that different masks were given to the people by the powers. And you wear masks that align with those to like show your veneration. There's a period of 2 weeks in the midwinter around their midwinter holiday where you always wear a mask in public, so that if you're shopping for gifts or whatever, nobody knows who you are, so they can't spoil the surprise for you, and things like that. So there's like all kinds of traditions around like not telling anybody what mask you're wearing so that you preserve your identity. But then there's also like the sly traditions of, if you're dating someone or want to date someone, you can disclose your mask so that they can find you in a crowd at a gala or a fete or something like that. Even the idea of like tying someone's mask ribbons on them is considered like a gesture of intimacy. You don't let just anybody tie your ribbons on, because if they can tie your ribbons, they can untie your ribbons. And that's kind of like a sub-suggestion of like, I'm willing to take off other clothes too, kind of thing. There's a lot to it, and I'm trying to just remember everything off the top of my head, and I'm sorry if I'm not putting it out very eloquently. But it's really fun. Patrick, you can't hear me? Oh, okay, so Dennis can hear me. That's a good sign. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. And like the two dominant motifs of the Kayans are masks and compass roses. So, oh, you can't hear the AC. Okay, perfect. I was like, oh no, what technical difficulties am I having now? Because we all know me and the technical difficulties. My God. Yeah. I especially like the shopping and societal implications with how people interact with masks. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's important to think of how these cultural symbols permeate things. Like I remember reading an article a very long time ago about the image of the crucifix and just how it's gotten out into society in a lot of ways that are not intentionally religious. And I remember the author of the article interviewing a stripper, and she was wearing a crucifix, and he was like, don't you think that that's hypocritical? And she was like, well, it doesn't mean for me what it means for everyone else. Like, I'm wearing this because this was my grandmother's or whatever her reason was, not because I'm necessarily a Christian. And so just this idea that what does an artifact do in the hands of people, whether they believe in its symbology or not? And you see this with brands. There's a lot of people that won't wear certain brands because they're not ecologically conscious or they support sweatshop labor. And so you're voting with your morals and your economics at that point. But I don't think that's any different than voting with your ideologies. So I think it's just an extension of that, based on other ideologies, not just religious ones. So I think that there's a lot to be said for how do artifacts get into the material culture and how do they get used and what do they get used for? Like, one of my societies in the book is a pacifist society. And so I've been trying to rationalize how they have certain tools like axes that have never developed the connotation of weapons. Like they've always just stayed tools because like then you get into the philosophy of whether or not humans or other humanoids are inherently violent or not inherently violent. Is pacifism a learned trait? And in my culture, it is a learned trait. They still have the capacity for violence, but they're trained out of it very, very strictly by the cultural milieu that they live in. But how do you maintain the idea of something as a tool when anything can be used as a weapon? And so, well, they have them, but like they don't hunt. They fish, but they do not hunt. It's an island culture, so megafauna and stuff is fairly rare. They would probably hunt themselves out of food relatively quickly if they were hunting all the time. They fish, they gather, stuff like that. They have the ability, but there's a certain amount of like childishness in terms of childishness is the wrong word. And it's not naivete. Optimism about not having to use it. Their alternative to like physical violence is mental violence. They are really, really high level illusionists. And so instead of like physically attacking someone, and like the restriction of their pacifism is you can't shed blood, like you cannot do physical harm, but they use illusion to trap people. They use illusion to confuse their enemies and to convince them to leave and stuff like that. So on it's a technicality that they're not doing violence because it depends on what your definition of violence is, right? And in my setting, this actually caused a massive schism because there are other groups within their racial group that say that the sovereignty of your mind is paramount. And so they see the fact that these illusions and this mind control magic is messing with your mental sovereignty as a bigger sin than stabbing someone. And so there was a massive war about it that ended up being that there was almost a genocide of the Ladai, the illusionists. And they've been kept very, very firmly under watch ever since then because they're dangerous, according to the precepts of the rest of their people. And the Ladai don't see it as dangerous. They see it as the better way of being because you're not ultimately going to kill someone. So the preservation of life is still intact. And I like exploring those kinds of themes. Like when I was doing my master's thesis, I wrote a lot about like societal harm in terms of the allowance of same-sex marriage and stuff, which I believed was a good thing because it allowed for equal opportunity rights and it allowed for the full participation in the marketplace of ideas, in the marketplace of democracy, the marketplace of economics, as long as all of those things are being allowed to be approached with equality, as if these other factors like marriage don't ultimately matter. Because I have a problem with the way that marriage privileges people who decide to get married and disprivileges those who don't. Because I believe that there's just complicated nonsense about that. Anyway, what was I saying? One of the things that was going on with my project that I did not really even think about until I got to my defense was my external defense advisor said to me, like, you talk a lot about social harm and about how allowing equal rights under the law prevents social harm. He said, but you never actually specifically talk about what you mean by harm. Like at no point do you define what harm is. You're just letting people assume that you're speaking the same language on this without ever making it actually clear. And it was such a powerful critique, and it was a very valid one. that it's something that I've thought about a lot in my world building since then. Like, what is considered a harm? What is considered a benefit? How does all of that work? Um, and like, because most cultures are pretty express about that kind of thing. And I think the only reason that I wasn't express about it in my project is that we live in a world now where most of us agree what the harms are without having to actually speak to them in a specific way. Like, we've kind of all agreed that like rape and murder and robbery are harmful, but then like that's on the top level, right? We all kind of agree on those specific words, but like, what about wage theft? What about the fact that, like, in Alberta now, your employer can make you work more than 12 hours a day without paying you overtime? Like, that's a new evolution. So just things like, okay, so what do we mean when we use that word? And I'm a fairly massive linguistic determinist. Like, I'm very post-structural in that regard. So I know that I get hung up on that stuff more than maybe some other people would. But it's important to me. I know my personal interpretation of the mental violation would be more harm than a physical confrontation. I think I agree with you. I do think I agree with you, Dennis. I think I rest on that too. But like, I have a main character who is Ladai, and I have a lot of sympathy for her position. Her story arc involves going from being raised among these pacifist people to being forced out into the world after her university is destroyed by a dragon. And she falls in with a party of adventurers and basically has to learn violence in order to defend her newfound friends. And just the philosophical arc of her coming to grips with it as a necessity, and like, at what point do you use it and when do you not use it? And like, can she maintain her own sense of identity as Ladai and still be enacting in this practice that they hold to be anathema? So yeah, I love her story. I love her story so much. Eventually it will entirely get written, but you know, that may take me 20 years. But yeah, she's fun. Halfway through the show, Shay, do you want to take a poll to continue the map or move into world building? Yeah, I mean, what do people want to do? We can world building, we can keep drawing maps. I'm open to suggestions. You're absolutely right, Dennis. Like, having more cooks in the kitchen, I think, is always a better thing. I think it makes your world building stronger. Because there's always going to be stuff that I don't consider either. Like, one of the major benefits of Dave is that he comes from a very different perspective on the world. He's much more practical than I am. He's much more comes from a position where, as they say, I think it's Starship Troopers, violence is the authority from which all other authority is derived, and that is not a position that I hold. And so we have, it's not. Are you gonna make round two? I can. I was just gonna go to the basement. I can make round two. I would love that. Thank you. He heard me talking. But yeah, so we hold very different philosophical positions on like the origin of authority and stuff like that, which makes living in our house very interesting sometimes. Yeah. What else can I say about that? Not much, hey? Not much. All right, what do we want to do? Do we want to keep drawing this map and just talking about random stuff, or do we want to move into some world building? I'm feeling like just kind of burnt out on a lot of stuff, so I don't promise that I'm going to be a font of ideas today, but I like the idea of collaborating on some stuff. Yeah, BS some more? Okay, we'll just keep doing what we're doing, then that works for me. I think I have a lot more respect for that position now than I did 6 years ago. And I'm starting to become more and more critical of it as I'm seeing authority, especially physical authority, become abused. Like, I'm thinking a lot about the Black Lives Matter movement and police brutality and stuff as I'm thinking about this particular moment. And just how does that all work? And who polices the police kind of questions. And I think those are important world building consequences too. Like, we did some world building a while back on Baranov, who is one of the justices in the city of Gatto. And we decided that he killed off his older sister to take her place on the bench because she was corrupted, and he didn't want to have that corruption be part of the thing. So his version of the lesser of two evils was to hire someone to murder her so he the more ethical person, could take her place on the court's bench. But then, like, that means he's corrupt, right? Who finds him out? Who judges the judge kind of situation. Yeah. But don't you think, Dennis, that the only way to prove your capacity for violence is to demonstrate it? Because otherwise it's just a threat. Dave and I have this conversation sometimes too about gunboat diplomacy and what happened with Japan when Japan had to forcibly open to the West in the 50s because of the Americans. And I struggle with that, because the only reason that boat worked is because it got demonstrated somewhere else. Like, I would otherwise just look at a boat and go, hey, you're a boat, right? I would need to know, like, this is the gunning part of that equation. So, I mean, but that's the thing. Like, the only way that you know the guns are serious is if you've seen them be shot before. Otherwise, they're just an object. And so I don't think you can have the threat of violence without the display of violence. Yeah, you may be able to. I just don't know that that happens on the regular. I'm curious to know about that. I mean, I'm thinking about my friend Brian, who teaches close quarter combat sometimes, and like, sure, you can practice against dummies, but it really becomes real when you practice against one of your buddies. And then you both have to commiserate about the bruises that you have later and stuff like that. So I don't know. I just find it all very interesting and not something I have a lot of thing. Yeah. Okay, that's an example I hadn't considered. But that relies on people being able to extrapolate consequences to themselves. And as Dave has pointed out to me a number of times, like, people are not always good at going, oh, this is how this is going to impact me. So I just think that's potentially very interesting. And yeah, I don't know what else I'm thinking about that. You kind of do. Or else you're like working on some assumptions that certain reactions are going to be true, like, across human experiences, which is a biological evolutionary, or not biological, an evolutionary psych perspective. This is the words I want. Oh my goodness. I think there's a lot to be said for some schools of thought within evolutionary psych. I think they get pretty reductionist pretty quickly, though. And so we need to be careful of being like, yeah, evolutionary psych, sis boom bah. But I think there's a certain amount of, yeah, maybe, to some of what they have to say. And see, that is kind of the root of my argument, because I come from a perspective that believes more firmly in communication and compassion. And that if you spend time getting to know someone, you can get on the same page and reach consensus without having to resort to violence. And in my life experience, which is admittedly very privileged, I am a white person who performs femininity. I have education. I have been largely middle class for most of my life. I've had some periods of poverty, but they've still even been privileged periods because, broke student kind of poverty, not like homeless poverty. My experience of the world is that I've always been able to talk to somebody. I've never had a situation where I've had to threaten violence or been the recipient of violence, physical violence. I've had like, psychological shit to deal with. So I've always felt like these things are of course possible, but talking to Dave and talking to other people that are friends of mine that are in the army, like that recourse is not always available. It's just been my experience that I've never had to move beyond that set of paradigms. And so I understand that. I am understandably less enthused about a world where my version of events is not the usual, because I think my version of events is important. But what are you going to do, right? I mean, if you understand people, you can generally reach consensus with them. And that to me is the goal. Like always the goal. Do I think there was a way to reach consensus with Hitler? I don't know. The thing about my style of communication is it really happens best between individuals and not groups. When I can spend the time to become intimately familiar with you as a person, understand your fears, understand your hopes, understand your worldview, we can almost always find middle ground. The empathy is strong enough, I think, to achieve that. That said, that kind of approach does not work well with aggregates, because aggregates are constantly comprised of more than one individual, which means you start to have a pluralism of definitions and experiences, which makes it really, really hard to find consensus, because the phrase, do you know what I mean, starts to mean multiple things as opposed to just one, yes, I think I hear you, or no, I don't think I hear you. And so, hi. Oh, it's downstairs. Okay. Sorry.
What do you want?
The chocolate raspberry, please. Okay. Thank you. So I don't know. Like, do I think with Hitler as an individual? Yeah, I think given enough time, maybe. Do I think with the Nazis as a unit? No, because people are coming with their own ideologies as to why that's appealing. And this is ultimately like Dave's argument for the use of force, is that sometimes you just don't have the time to rationalize and empathize and do it my way. Sometimes the threat just needs to be put down. And I have to say he's got a point. I just don't like it. So if you did it early enough, maybe. Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing, is you've got to be super perceptive about what early enough looks like. And you've got to be willing to intervene right at that point and to do the nitty-gritty of the psychological work that all of that is going to entail. And a lot of people, A, don't have the skills, B, don't have the inclination, and C, don't have the time. So that was the thing. I mean, it takes a whole different style of approaching people for that to work. Yeah. The most Canadian story ever. What, that my coffee cup wasn't up here? I feel bad. He came all the way up the stairs if he didn't need to. We do apologize a lot. Well, I do. Dave does not apologize hardly ever. But I would argue more Canadians apologize like I do than don't apologize like Dave. It is definitely lineage of our very British history. The Brits apologize for a lot too. Yeah, it is nearly dual citizenship. You're not wrong. Thank you, my heart. You are my favorite.
I know it's weird. Love it.
We're having a fun conversation.
Oh?
Yeah.
Well, what?
about like cultural constraints around harm and violence and empathy and
You were right. Quoting Starship Troopers, that is a factually true statement.
yeah, we were just picking it apart.
But it's true.
I know, but there's limits to it. Oh, you forgot to put the sweetener in here.
Oh, shit. Sorry.
Nope, that's bitter. I'm gonna give that back to you. Thank you.
You're sweet enough. You don't need any sweetener.
Oh, but I gotta have it in my coffee.
Oh.
I'm a civilian.
You're a military spouse.
Domestic Niner. I am not a bitter coffee person at all. Not even a little bit. If it's not sweet, I'm not drinking it. Rhubarb is so good. Dave will drink it any old way. He is fine with it being creamy and sweet. He's fine with it being black. He's fine with any combination in the middle because it's just a caffeine delivery service. For me, it's an experience, and I do not eat things that I don't enjoy. I am a snob that way. It is not worth it. Dennis says he's with you,
On the.
Starship Troopers,
It's true.
but he's American Army too, so
Yeah.
you guys are all the same. No, just kidding. You're not all the same. That's a terrible, terrible universalism.
I would say I'm remarkably different than most military people.
I would say you are.
That's right. Stay up here. Lay down. Don't move.
He's under the desk again.
Mm.
You going back downstairs?
Well, I'm gonna have a coffee now. So
Now that there's coffee to be had. Thanks, baby.
when you're done, I'll probably get you to give me a hand. I want to put on the 2 extra wings onto the table today.
Oh, yeah, so you have them ready for game tonight?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll probably only be about another 20 minutes.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yep. Once you've drank it out of that metal tub in the middle of a frozen forest, it's all the same. Yes, I imagine that's true. Dave does not reheat leftover coffee. Dave does not even finish a mug of coffee if it is no longer hot. I am the person in our house that drinks cold coffee. But I think that has more to do with the fact that I had braces as an adult, and my tolerance for very hot and very cold beverages have gone out the window. So it's just tastier for me to have it at a middling temperature through like the warm to cold range. Then I can drink it and enjoy it. It would be good on toast. Deliciousness. Oh man, I love iced coffee. I do. I love it cold. Dave is not a fan. Does not get the Canadian obsession with ice caps at all. You miss Timmy Hose? Yeah, that's fair. I don't know how I feel about that Ranger dip, Dennis. That sounds like that would get the thing. We found a Tim Hortons when we were in Scotland, you guys. And I took photos of all of the signs because they had like on the bathroom signs there were people in plaid shirts. It's just like this is hysterical. Like, is this what Scotland thinks Canada is? Because if so, it's hilarious and I am into it. It made me laugh really hard. No idea what you guys are talking about. Free donut when the light is on. What? Where's this? Why does it sound like it would precipitate a stampede? Have a good one, Steph. Seven cops, yeah, for sure. My hometown, where I grew up, um, they built the Tim Hortons in the very late 90s or early to mid 2000s. It would have had to be before 2001 because I think it was there before I graduated high school. Um, but it's right across a very narrow street from the police station, the RCMP detachment. And there was a lot of jokes about the construction being delayed because they had to put a tunnel in between the two. It was pretty funny. Late 90s? That sounds about right, Laura. That is an old picture. It's a very old picture. Oh, stretch. And maybe let that get a little too dark. All right, friends. I'm going to call it here for today. Dave needs a hand getting the table sorted out before his Warhammer game tonight. So I'm going to go give him a hand with that. And I will probably continue working today. So if I decide I want to stream again, I'll pop on and let you guys know. But thank you for coming and hanging out. Thank you for the great conversation. I really appreciate that. It makes me happy. I'm glad today was fun. Yeah, Warhammer, he started playing. He's all excited about it. He wants me to start playing, and I'm just kind of like, indifferent. Do not think this is going to be my deal. 40K. He wants to play fantasy too, but we only have one 3D printer that's printing off armies. So whenever he gets his second one going, he'll be able to print off another one, I guess. So yeah. All right, I'm gonna go. You guys have a good one. And I will, what is his army? His army is the Custodes. If that means anything to you, it means nothing to me. They're gold. They have red plumes on their helmets. That's about the length of what I know. You have Tyranids. Yeah, okay. I know what Tyranids are. Cool. Yeah, I know. I got nothing. This is a thing I do not care about, but it makes him happy, so that's fine. Starship Trooper bugs. Nice. All right. I'm going to go. I will catch you guys later. Take it easy. And I will probably stream again tomorrow. So I'll post on the Facebooks. And yeah, See you guys then. Catch you later. Bye.